Hi, everyone. I'm Tracy Dauterman. I'm a local parent here in Paso Robles with kids in the public school system. And I'm here with Yessenia. I'll have her introduce herself in a minute. We are going to talk about the current situation that we find ourselves in with the possibility of a school closing in our district. It would be an elementary school. And we'll go into that in a little bit more detail. Yessenia, can you introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Yessenia Echevarria, and I am the co-founder of Paso People's Action. And our mission for our work in Paso Robles is to amplify the voices of the BIPOC community, which is Black, Indigenous, people of color, and marginalized community as well.
Can you give us a little bit of background on the current situation that we find ourselves in?
Yes, so I want to do a little disclaimer is that this video is done by two concerned people. This is not an affiliation to the Paso Robles School District. It is not a formal response. Well, not a formal response, but it's coming from two citizens. It's not coming from the school district. And also, this is not an affiliation to any of the organizations or roles that we may represent. So now with that out of the way, the first about 20 minutes or so of this video will focus on catching people up to speed. Many of you have had questions and have reached out via email, text messages, or Facebook. So this is our best way to communicate with community to be more effective and efficient. So if you are watching this video, the first 20 minutes or so will be focused on how did we get here and the history of what's been going on. And then the rest of the video, which we'll shoot just to keep this within an hour, will be focused on questions that the community has shared with us that they would like some clarification on. So why are we here? So I think it is important to recognize that a lot of things had to happen for the conversation to now be at a possible school closure. So we have to recognize that a lot of where we're at happened during previous superintendents and previous school board members. So catching up everyone to speed, a lot of what we're seeing the era of Chris Williams, who was our former superintendent. There are real concerns as to financial best practices that may have not been followed. And now we're in this situation. It's important to keep in mind that the school site that we are concerned about is the 36th Street campus, better known to be the Georgia Brown dual immersion program, which is an amazing program. It's brought so much joy and pride to our community, and we want to make sure that that program is protected and continues to thrive, as it's really brought so much positivity to our community. So what's been unfortunate is that we can go back to knowing that the 36th Street campus, known as Georgia Brown, has been falling apart for years. And even though a lot of our work has been focusing in the past close to 4 years, things have been going on for about 10 years, 15 years, even 20 years. And so the reality is Paso Robles has grown a lot. The reality is that we have two of our oldest school sites, which is Georgia Brown and Glen Speck, that needed to be modernized, needed to be retrofitted, needed pipes to be updated, needed sewage to be updated. It's just like you, if you are a homeowner, you know that as time goes by, there is wear and tear. And maybe when you bought your home, it was brand new, but now it's 20 years old. And you know that toilet is now not working as great. Maybe you need to paint your house. Maybe now there's a leak in the roof that you need to fix. Maybe now you're having some sewage issues. And I think that's just to say about wear and tear, where you just need to keep up with the maintenance of structural buildings. So what makes it interesting is that now we're in a position where we are facing the reality of a possible school closure. And the reality is, if there was no money allocated previously to renovate a school site, then we could be like, yes, demolish the school site tomorrow. And it's going to cost more money to renovate Georgia Brown because it was left to pretty much fall apart. And there's a lot of questions with that. How did that happen? Were there reports made by teachers to the principal to the superintendent? And there's real documentation. We've seen the Georgia Brown community step forward with pictures. There's pictures of teachers teaching in classrooms with leaky roofs. There's pictures of roaches. So what happened? And that's part of Paso People's Actions concern is there is a historical pattern of negligence to the 36th Street campus, and that is very concerning. So the reality is that in 2016, there was a Measure M ballot, a Measure M bond put on the ballot. And the Measure M bond, which you can look up, but this is public information, is that there were supposed to be specific things that were to happen. Number one, renovating our old schools, putting in new piping, retrofitting, replacing leaky pipes, all of this work along with other programs. Now, it is important to say that the measure, the district doesn't have to do everything on the measure, but I would like to think that they knew that we had 2 old school sites that needed the most love and attention and dire attention because we were facing with real situations. It's not safe to live in a house if your sewer is overflowing and it's not working. It's not safe to live in your house if there are roaches. And one step further, I would like to think, because this is not just a house, this is a school site where children are being had, that it's one step further, more urgent to make sure that these things are being handled. So the Measure M bond was put on the ballot and 57% of voters said, yes, we are wanting to have $95 million allocated for these repairs. Voters turned out and supported this ballot. So if that was you, thank you so much, but now we need your help. The reality is our democratic process is on the line. A lot of the reason why folks have no trust in government process is because of broken promises. And here's a situation where we're seeing broken promises. Up to 2016, to about 5 years ago, there was no reason for the public not to be under the understanding that Georgia Brown was going to be renovated or that things were going to be fixed. Because keep in mind, mine's and yours tag dollars went into this. So I think that's part of the reason why, Tracy, I think maybe for a while we didn't hear a lot of commotion about the conditions because the community gave grace to believe, okay, we did our parts. And clearly there was a committee that came together to put this Measure M bond together, right? To understand that we're gonna ask constituents for this money so that this can be done. So from 2016 to about 5 years ago, we were giving a lot of grace to think it's gonna get done. The school district knows what they're doing. They're working on this. And perception was, which is true, which is another big question is, if we knew that Georgia Brown was in the worst conditions, why did we not start with Georgia Brown? Why was the work not started with Georgia Brown? Instead, it was started with Glenn Speck, which is on the 17th Street area. So up to about, I would say 4 years ago, we were under the perception that Glenn Speck was going to go into a temporary campus, and then the 17th Street campus was going to be renovated. Okay, cool. We're seeing our tax dollars at play. Cool. We are seeing the promises of the Measure M bond. We're rocking and rolling. We're good to go. And then came a conversation of, uh-oh, we don't have enough money to build Georgia Brown. So we're going to consolidate. Once again, I want to be very clear that if there was no money allocated and voters did not turn out to vote, then we can let this go. The reality is we have to think long-term. We have to think about 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, 20 years down the road, 30 years down the road. One thing that I have learned, Tracy, about community members and especially about voters is that they have a pretty great memory. This Measure M bond was about our kids. It's about our schools. It's about the community. So if we ever want to put another measure on the ballot to benefit our community children, we will never be able to do that. And I hope you really take that into consideration, because that's what's on the line today. The reality is the community had every right to believe that things were going to get handled. And now we're being told something different because there's been possible malpractice of financial management. So now we're seeing school sites being told that they may not have a school home. And you best believe parents are confused, they're frustrated, and they are fearful. And they have every right to feel all of these things above. The reality is we have allowed the school district to be the source of information, but there have been a lot of concerns. In order to close down a school site, there is a clear pathway to do that. And even the state of California issues out a best practices on how to close down a school site to prevent segregation, to prevent discrimination, and to prevent that it is a fair process for everyone. There are clear concerns here that the 7-Eleven committee made the recommendation to close a school site that are known as the Georgia Brown dual immersion program. And I think it's important here to also add this part, Tracy, is that it is our understanding, and Superintendent Kurt DeBose, there's articles where he is stating that the dual immersion is not going to go anywhere, that the dual immersion is one of our proudest programs. It will continue to be there. It's about the school site. So it's about the 36th Street campus. It's about the location of that neighborhood. So I think it's important that if you are fearful that your program is going to be dismantled, you need to ask those questions to the school board. You need to ask those questions to the superintendent and have clear clarification on the reality of what that is. We're going to post in the comments the article where Kurt DeBose, our superintendent, is stating that the program is not going away. So we're seeing a lot of concerns from community members, Tracy, which is concerning. And so in order to close down a school site, there needed to be a committee made about 7 to 11 members, which is why this committee is called 7-11 committee. And the concern when Paso People's Action stepped in was that we started seeing very much that there was a process to close down a school site. It was very much in process. There are clear concerns that the community was not aware of this, that the committee was not compromised of enough parents or even representing the demographics of the community that it serves. We have a large Hispanic community, which requires to have translations and information translated, as well as participation. So I want to bring people in, for those that are just now maybe hearing this for the first time or may not be aware, that Paso People's Action has been very consistently working on this topic. And we have done everything that we needed to do that is given to us as citizens, as residents, as concerned parents, community members, community stakeholders, and the correct avenues, which means we have taken up to public comments. We have written letters to the press. We have had private meetings, or not private meetings, but in private settings meetings with Kurt DeBose at the school district or with admins, talking about our concerns, trying to figure out clarifications and how to work together. So we've given a lot of grace for about close to 4 years, and we're still very much, it feels like we're back to square one. So the reality is, we've taken up the public comment, we've done everything that we could do. And the reality is that we did not feel heard. Our concerns were not being answered. Our questions were not being answered. So in our efforts to make sure that the process is being done correctly according to the state of California and according to federal law, we felt the need to bring this up to California Rural Legal Assistance and have them take a look at our concerns. And California Rural Legal Assistance became our representatives. So we submitted a complaint to the Office of Civil Rights, to the Federal Office of Education, and we did the due process to wait if our concerns would be accepted or not. The reality is our concerns were accepted, and it triggered an investigation with the Office of Civil Rights to look into the process of this possible school closure. And I wish that I had an update for you, but I don't. So we still have an Office of Civil Rights complaint very much pending. This Office of Civil Rights complaint was based on three things that we are still seeing today. Number one, the possible pattern of discrimination against Latino parents. That means them not being included, them not having translations, them not having a voice at the table. Number two, the 7-Eleven committee, the fact that it was not comprised by a demographic that was representative to parents or community members. Number three, this possible school closure. So still very much pending. And the reality is, about a year ago, after us showing up over and over again, a year ago, our former school board made a really tough decision, really tough decision. And I know that that was not an easy decision to be made. It was very hard. But the decision was that there would be no school closure, that the 36th campus would be kept open, and that it would be renovated to the best abilities. And that there would be, I call it the great compromise, because I think in anything we have to be realistic that we may not get everything that we need, but not need that what we ask for. So the reality is that now follow me here, because this is where it gets tricky. So buckle up. The compromise was that we have the Glen Speck community here and the Georgia Brown community here, both school sites needing a renovation to their school site. So keep in mind, Glen Speck was the first school site to go first. So they went into a temporary campus. So they were there, sacrificed. When they moved in, the campus was not ready. There's an article that we can reference below in the comments where there was nails, there was a bunch of dirt. Families went in with the best of intentions, knowing that maybe they made the sacrifices today so that they could go into a brand new campus, 3 years down the road. Being good sports about it. Not all of them fit on that campus. Children had to be moved around, but everyone did that the best that they could. So Georgia Brown is still at their same school site, while Glen Speck went into the temporary campus. Well, now fast forward to the 17th Street campus, now known as Glen Speck. Now it's been renovated, and it's a beautiful, beautiful building, built by the input of Glen Speck families and staff. And so the idea once upon a time was that Georgia Brown was going to go straight into the brand new campus that was meant for Glen Speck. And that was met with a lot of confusion and a lot of parents from Glen Speck being upset, which is completely understandable. So the parents from Glen Speck spoke up. The Georgia Brown parents spoke up as well. And I think given the circumstances that were there, at the time, the board tried their best. I think I like to be fair as much as possible. And the reality when we keep going back is we can each claim that we're trying our best, but the reality is the public deserves a standard of leadership. And that's where the confusion is at. That's where the problem is at, is that we don't need to try or check the checkbox. We need to go above and beyond. And I think we're seeing this pattern of not having enough information because First of all, if you couldn't tell already and going into this, I'm sure it's maybe been 10 minutes or so going into this explanation, it's very confusing. All of this is super confusing. So when you have parents that are just trying to make ends meet, trying to keep their job, trying to take the children to the soccer practices, trying to do the best that you can, living a good life, the last thing that people want to do is involve themselves in something complicated. They don't want to involve themselves. They're saying that the district's got it, the school board's got it. That's why we elected them. There's a reason why they're called board trustees. So I understand the confusion. So watch the video. Really key parts is the fact that, number one, there is a due process that needs to be followed in order to close a school site. And with our current situation, what is that question is, did that due process happen or not? Number two, the reality of a falling apart school site. If there was money, not if, let me correct myself, there was money allocated. There was money allocated to improve the conditions, to fix the conditions at that. So what happened to that? We have to focus on that. Number three, the reality of misinformation and rumor mill, which I had a meeting with Superintendent Kurt DeBose recently and said, you need to be the source of information. The school district needs to be the source of information so that we can prevent rumor mills. So because of all in all, if you're still watching this and still following us, because there's been some massive concerns, there has been an official there's been an official public records request outlining what happened to the Crumb committee, what happened in the 7-Eleven committee, what happened with emails with the concerns of Georgia Brown location. Because we're not satisfied and because we have concerns and because we have that right, because this, at the end of the day, this is the beauty of a public education, that we get to participate, we get to ask questions, we get to request things that are public information. So it's really crucial that we understand, and I think Tracy and I, as many others, we can confidently say is, look, we just want to make sure that we're following everything that needs to happen so that 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, I can look at myself in the eye and know that given the circumstances with the information, with everything, that we made the best decision that we could for our next generations. And the reality is, we had a meeting with community last night, and there was common themes that were outlined in that meeting, as well as knocking on doors. There was an intentional effort to go to the 36th Street area, knock on doors, put our flyers up on businesses and share with people. There was 3 massive things that there's a pattern here. Number one, still not enough information. This is so confusing, guys. Still not enough information. What the heck is going on? What about this Measure M bond? What about the $95 million? What about the construction that has been happening? What about all these things? And the public deserves to know. The public deserves to say, let's slow down the process and get our questions answered. So that's been one. Number two is community members being tired of the division, tired of the Glen Speck community being pinned against the Georgia Brown community, the Georgia Brown community being pinned against the Pfeiffer community. First off, this is such a small community, and many of you have shared and expressed this sentiment. We all have friends and family members that either have a child at the given schools that are being talked about. These are people that we see at the fair. These are people that may be on the same soccer league as our children. These are people that you might be serving at your church with. And the community has expressed that they are tired of the division. They are tired of us not being able to come together and find solutions that are based on data, current information, and an opportunity for all school sites to be able to be given a presentation all together, as well as making sure that each school site is able to hear what the other school site is concerned about. So Tracy, I know I just said a mouth full of things. Did I miss anything?
If people are still watching, thank you. I know this is, there's so much information and the history goes back so far. I have spent more time than I'd like to admit trying to figure out all of these things myself, and I find out new information every day. So none of us are complete experts on any of this. Yessenia and I may know, Yessenia knows more than I do, but I think that we may know more than a lot of you in the community. And so we thought that this would be a good forum to at least get some of the information out there. There were some things that Yessenia mentioned that I think people might not know too much about. This is probably not the video to explain them, but things like the Crumb Committee and what a 7-Eleven committee is. I think it's also important. I can briefly touch on this. Those other two subjects probably deserve their own videos, but what the board members do and what their roles are. So the trustees in Paso Robles, we have 7 trustees. Those are our board members. I will use those two terms interchangeably. And they are elected officials. They are not employees of the school district. I believe their only compensation is benefits. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Correct. They're public servants.
Yes, they are public servants. So they serve us, the voters who put them in office, and they are there to ensure that the school district is providing accurate information to the public, accurate information to them, because the school district is where they come up with the things that are voted on. So the superintendent is the employee of the trustees, and he reports to them. The rest of the district employees all report into the superintendent. So the trustees are really there to hold the superintendent accountable, make sure that the district is being run well. It's really important for us to reach out to the trustees and express concerns when we have them. I think it helps inform the trustees as to what's important to the members of the public. I'm sure they're getting a lot of questions right now about all of the things we just talked about. If you are looking for ways to get in touch with them, they all have email addresses on the school district website, and you can pretty easily find them under Board of Trustees. Is there anything else that I should go into?
I think it is important. I just want to, really push this, is that I know many of you, I've shared concerns of why was the 36th Street campus neglected and why is it to the point where it is now. And in all this work, I think it's important to echo Tracy that the whole point of why we're fighting so hard for this information and to save that school is, I think we owe it to that community, as well as the children of Georgia Brown, to make sure that we do right by them, to make sure that we never allow this to ever happen ever again, that things should never get to a point where it's this complicated, where we get to a point that we have to talk about a school site because it's such in a terrible condition that it makes more sense to shut it down. So I think it's important that many of you may be still scratching your head of how is this possible, and that is part of our Office of Civil Rights Complaint investigation, right? That's part of our request for the public records request as well. So hold on tight to those things. We don't want to get into too much speculation, but I know you're all entitled to your own opinions, but we also want to follow the due process to really follow an investigation.
There was something that you mentioned earlier about the temporary campus that the Glenn Speck children were moved into that I wanted to touch on, because it's a concern that I've heard from my friends that have kids at Georgia Brown, and that is the size of the temporary campus. We've been repeatedly told by the district that it can house all of the students at Georgia Brown, and the student population at Georgia Brown at the end of last school year was somewhere around 620-ish kids. Is that, I know Glenn Speck is a lot smaller. I want to say it was more like 350 or so. And if it wasn't quite big enough for Glenn Speck, then how would the Georgia Brown families, I mean, how would those students fit into that campus? Do you have any input into that?
Well, the reality is, okay, so keep in mind that the Georgia Brown dual immersion program, there's a frequency that it needs to operate from in order for the children to be dual immersed, right? And so when you interrupt that program, it could affect, or it will affect, the outcome of those children that are participating in that program to be fluent in Spanish. So the reality is that the children are not going to fit at this temporary campus. And that's the reason why I think it's fair that the Georgia Brown parents are upset. But that was the same predicament that the Glen Speck parents were in. And the Glen Speck community had to be split up. Now, what we have to recognize, and this is part of the making right on the information and being truthful on the information, is I think in order for people to form an opinion or for us to move forward, Tracy, we need to have real numbers. We need to have real conversations of what are the real options here. And it's my understanding, Tracy, is that the Georgia Brown community is not going to fit at that temporary campus. I think we have to focus on solutions. So how can we keep this program intact? How can we keep this community together? Which I think the best option, if we're talking about remodeling Georgia Brown or the 36th Street campus, is that we accommodate this program, which means we may need to rent more trailers to accommodate them. That way they can be together as a community. I think that's a real option that we can look at. And keep in mind, if there's been one thing consistent too, Tracy, of our messaging with Paso People's Action, is that this should not be a transactional business move, right? And people are going to say, well, Yessenia, what are you talking about? That makes no sense. I think we are in the industry of children, of investing into children, into building up children, into building up communities and seeing value in children. So when you see value in something, you're going to invest, even if your return on investment might not be a quick turnaround, even in the first year, 5 years, or maybe even 10 years. So I think we have to approach education that it's about children and that it's not transactional. This is not about disposable relationships. This is long-term relationships that really make our community become stronger. So let's talk about that. Can we get more trailers on the temporary campus to house all of the children? I know one of the concerns for the Georgia Brown community is pickup and drop off, which it sounds like it's been a nightmare actually at the location that they're at. And the reason why I know that is because I went to go speak to the neighbors over there. So we want to make sure that in all this conversation, Tracy, we put also one of the top priorities is safety. We want to make sure children are safe. So clearly, Georgia Brown community has shared the concern of safety of drop off and pickup and how effective that process will be. Tracy, you and I, as well as Lloyd Bryan and many others, have brainstormed ideas. And one of the brainstormings was, can we reach out to our city officials and ask, is there a time frame from which we can close down Spring Street to ensure that safety measures are being done, where the only focus area operating on Spring Street are really the Georgia Brown parents for pickup and drop off? And I think, once again, because this is about our community, Tracy, that I think we can together come together to really best serve the needs of people. And I think we do need to serve the needs of the Georgia Brown community. And I think these are realistic things, Tracy. Am I speaking too crazy?
No, I have another question for you. You said that the Glen Speck school had to be split up a little bit. What did you mean by that?
So because keep in mind, the temporary campus, which is located adjacent to Flamson, you can find it on Spring Street. It's a bunch of portables. I was actually a para-educator at the time. And I remember being on campus that first day that school temporary campus opened. And I have testimony on what the conditions were. And I was there. Anyhow, the temporary campus is not large enough to house a complete school community, which means that the Glen Speck community lost a portion of their students. And so those students had to make do and find a new school home. And because we don't have buses, the district could not even accommodate them with buses. That means that you have people that live over by Georgia Brown on the other end of town, either commuting to Pfeiffer, commuting to Virginia Peterson, commuting to Pat Butler. Once again, people made the sacrifices because they were thinking long-term. We get to go back to a brand new school, so we're willing to do the sacrifice. And so that's what I mean by the splitting up of a community, is that they physically, they do not literally fit. We're literally talking about not fitting in portables. Did that answer your question, Tracy?
Yes, I have another one though. I mean,
Yeah,
I can
keep
go on,
asking them,
I can
keep
go on
firing
all day.
away.
But I have one more, and then I think we can probably move on to the other questions that we got from other people. But I know that there was a building, I don't know if you know the answer to this question or not, but I know that there was a building added to the Flamson campus that was, I believe, intended for elementary age students. Was that used by the Glenn Speck school?
It's my understanding that it wasn't. And this is part of all the confusion too, Tracy. There were rooms or buildings added to Flamson. So what's interesting, and I think this is like a leeway too into the declining enrollment. So I think it's crucial when we talk about buildings and constructions, what's happening is, and I know everyone is busy, but I think one of the biggest lessons that we've learned is because we haven't been participating for multiple reasons, right? Either the information, maybe we weren't even invited, which is part of the problem here, is that many people were not even invited in the process of all of this. But we have to get involved, Tracy, because there's some real money being spent. There's some real big decisions that later affect outcomes that we're both scratching our heads, as well as other people, like saying, wait a second, this doesn't make sense. Why would you add more buildings, more space? It doesn't make sense.
I can ask this question of the district, and maybe that's where I should go, because that really should be the source of the information. But I was under the impression that building was added to Flamson to be like kind of part of the temporary campus so that they could house the students. Maybe it was only intended for use when Georgia Brown came over. I'm not sure. I don't really know.
And keep in mind too, is anytime we're talking about constructions, as much as you want to meet a dead hard line, it's not, right? Things got dragged around. We also have to keep in mind, we were dealing during COVID time when no one was prepared. We couldn't have the labor force. So a lot of hurdles have been thrown at us just to make this, just to thicken the plot even more. But the reality is that we do need to account and ask these questions, Tracy. We need to know, what was the intention of that extra space? Was that space used? What is the goal here?
Well, I also want to know, like, is it used now?
I don't know, to be honest with you. I don't know. I think that's a great question. If you're watching this video, ask that question. I think it's also important when we talk about large schools and declining enrollment. Let's give a little bit more of history. So back in the day, Lewis Middle School, what is known to be today as Lewis Middle School, was actually an elementary school. It was the original Winifred Pfeiffer school site. Then a new school site was built, which is across the street from Food for Less, which is now the Winifred Pfeiffer that we know. That was originally built to be a middle school. So it was built to be large. But we never.
I'm under the impression that they changed their mind in the process of construction when they built Pfeiffer and adjusted it to be an elementary school. So they put in like the right size bathrooms for elementary kids. Did some other maybe small adjustments to the building.
But yeah, so when we're talking about large school sites, also if you plan for a middle school, you're going to plan for a bigger building, right? What's interesting enough too is that Kermit King is actually the same blueprint as Pfeiffer. So once again, we have another large elementary school, and keep in mind our middle school was a high school, so it's going to be really big. So when we talk about declining enrollment and empty classrooms, I also feel if you really built really large schools, you're going to have some empty classrooms, but it may not be necessarily because of declining enrollment, but also because you just built really large schools.
I'm going to push back on that a little bit, because when I went through the capacity numbers that were released by the school district, they're attached to the agenda for the August 7th meeting. That's this coming Monday. So you can go onto the website under the board meetings, and you can see that there's an agenda. You can look through the whole agenda and you can download what I'm talking about. So it's capacity numbers. Unfortunately, the middle schools aren't included for some reason. They only included the elementary schools, but it does go through how all of the rooms on the campuses are used. And we only have one vacant classroom throughout all of the elementary schools right now. And there was a presentation made back in February of 2022, I believe on February 5th. And you can find this on the YouTube channel for the district. I would like to give props to the district for recording these meetings. It's really handy to be able to go back and look through this information. It is a helpful tool in getting information communicated to parents. If you don't know it's there, it is. So anyway, in this meeting, I believe it was around the 49-minute mark in this presentation, the capacity numbers appear to be greatly inflated on each school campus, because it appears that there was a very rudimentary calculation made as far as how many students each campus could hold. And that was a number of rooms times 28. And that included some rooms at the Pfeiffer campus that I'm aware of that are essentially the size of closets. They're used for instructional support. Like, I think that it's an intervention. One of them might be like a speech intervention room or something, but they're really tiny. They're not classrooms. There are some classrooms that are used for instructional support as well. So when we look at capacity numbers at each school campus, you can't just look at how many rooms there are and then just say you can put 28 students into each one, because realistically that would mean eliminating a lot of programs and a lot of things that are important to providing an equitable education for our students. I mean, math supports, English supports, there's a wide variety of things that those classrooms are used for if they don't have a full 28 students in them. So saying that our capacities are that high is a bit misrepresentative of what's actually possible or feasible. So I actually don't, after looking at those numbers, I actually don't feel like our campuses are huge by any means. I think that they are probably about the right size for elementary schools. There may be a little bit of room if you consolidated some of those services, which I would want to know that the people who are giving those services have been consulted and agree that it's possible to consolidate some of those offerings into classrooms to free up space for classes. But I just would like to see a bit more due diligence in that process before we jump to the conclusion that some of our school sites are overbuilt. I don't think they are.
And where did you get these numbers?
They're on the school district website. If you go to the Board of Trustees page and you go to board agendas, you can download the agenda for the Monday meeting, and it's an attachment to that agenda.
Very nice. And this is why it's important to have dialogue, right? This is why it's important to not just be in echo chambers of people who think like you, agree with you. I think, this is where we're a whole district. We're not just the district of Winifred Pfeiffer. We are a whole district that needs to accommodate every single child that steps foot on our campuses.
Absolutely. Well, why don't we get into the questions that we have from a few of the people who attended last night?
So I'm just going to insert here. If you're just joining us now on this video, just know that if you're watching at this point, we're now starting to ask questions that were shared with us by community members or parents. And if you watch the first half of the video, it's focusing on how did we get here?
Okay, so first question. The Georgia Brown families are under the impression that there is no money to rebuild their school site.
So keep in mind, once again, we're talking about the Measure M bond. That $95 million was set aside. And granted, not all of that bond was specifically to be used for buildings. It was used for multiple things. And so there should be also a copy of how this money was spent. And now we're towards the end of the Measure M bond money, and it's dwindled down. And that's been part of the concern. And I think that's part of I think if we look at easy solutions, Tracy, the easy solution is to close down a school. Like, if you make this about a numbers game, the easiest thing, if we want to do the lowest hanging fruit decision options here, this is the one to go. If you want to just get this done with, this is the easiest thing to do. But when we're talking about children and we're talking about community and we're talking, because, you know, Tracy, you and I don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what the projection of growth could be for Paso Robles. I mean, no one ever saw that we would become wine country, or else I would have bought like 20 homes, you know, when I was born. But, you know, the reality is we have to move from a space of caution. So to answer your question, it's my understanding we still have about $16 million that is available for Georgia Brown. Now, the reality is, because that building, that campus has been neglected for so long, it's going to need a lot more work. And the reality, I think what makes a lot of us uncomfortable too, Tracy, is that, of course, when you put off an issue, you're only going to make it worse, right? And a prime example of this is we had the storms recently, that if you had a leaky window or a leaky roof, your best thing that you can do is to resolve it yesterday. If you ignore it, it's only going to become a bigger issue. And now you're talking mold, now you're talking water damage, now you're talking more expenses. So we have to hold the accountability that the reality that we've always known that that campus needed way more work. And so, you know, people are scratching their heads. Well, why didn't Georgia Brown get started first? Why did they not start there first? I don't know the answer to that question. We're hoping that our public records request will give us more information on that. So there is $16 million set aside. And I think we need to be realistic, Tracy, of what can we do with those $16 million? And also look at, maybe we need to make decisions on other campuses that maybe another campus may not have their field worked on, right? We have to look at, you know, priorities. What is the priority here? Is it for us to save a school site and take the longer road, but knowing that the longer road is probably moving from a more conservative, cautious point, to know that, because I think we live in California, you don't get rid of real estate, you keep it. So that's been part of the concern, that we want to protect the 36th Street campus, and hopefully maybe even have that conversation, Tracy, as an option, that maybe Georgia Brown does stay at the 36th Street campus, and that we do right by them to build them a really awesome school site. So we have $16 million to work with that was allocated for them. That is my understanding, that is still there unless anything has changed, which we can get clarification on from the board.
So I recently asked that question of a board member, and I was told that there is $16 million set aside for that project. So there is money.
And I think the floating number that I was hearing too, Tracy, that it's going to cost about $30 million to redo Georgia Brown. And let's say that, let's just go with that number just for the sakes of numbers. And we only have 16 million. Where are we going to come up with that rest of that money? Because that has been the other question, is like, where do we come up with this money? I think what's important to recognize, Tracy, is because we're talking about children, we're talking about a community, and hopefully we're talking about long-term decisions. So to make things right, is that I don't feel that it is right for our children and our community to pay the price from the consequences from Chris Williams, the former superintendent, or other school board members. We have to do right. We need to fix the situation, which fixing the situation is finding creative solutions. And so someone did ask, well, then where would we get funding? Well, has the school district reached out to their state representatives for funding? Keep in mind, there's grants available. There's specific money set aside for specific communities, for low-income communities, for Latino communities. And we need to find partnerships. You know, Paso Robles has become the wine destination in the world. Let's maximize from that recognition to really uplift our school district and find ways to make amazing school sites. Because I will say this, regardless of where you live, if you have an amazing school district, that brings up your property value. And I think for the longest time, regardless of where your politics is at, regardless of what you believe in, I think we can all have a come to Jesus moment that our district has not been in the best of light, that I would like to see us focus back on education and turn the ship around so that we can become and work towards being the best school district in SLO County. And I think we can do that by turning the ship around on this issue and protecting this neighborhood school.
So some people asked why Piper was brought up and pinned against Georgia Brown. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I think it's important to know, and I think this is also part of the confusion, Tracy, is for the longest time when there was this conversation and process of a possible school closure, it really isolated two school communities, and the district made us feel like it was only about two school sites, which was Georgia Brown and Glenn Speck. So it's my understanding that those two school sites have had presentations given to them by Brad Kapowski and Kurtz, and I've attended a few. And so it was very focused to two school sites specifically. So the reality is that those two school sites have been really carrying on the heavy load of all of this. There was maybe a few options floated in that conversation, but the reality was always focusing on Georgia Brown and Glenn Speck. And the floating of options has always been the possibility of moving the Georgia Brown dual immersion program over pretty much across town over to Winifred Pfeiffer. And if you're not familiar with Paso Robles, Winifred Pfeiffer is located across the street from Food for Less, located across the street from new apartments going in 2 phases of brand new homes. It's in one of our most busiest streets, which is Creston Road, and Creston Road connects to Niblick, and we have about 7 schools that are all in the vicinity of that area. We're talking St. Rose Catholic Church, we're talking Trinity Christian School, we're talking Lewis Middle School, Winifred Pfeiffer Elementary, we're talking Almond Acres Charter School, we're talking Pat Butler, we're talking the high school. So it's already a heavy concentrated area of traffic, which is a wild mess. When you have people from the Bay Area complaining about traffic in Paso Robles, I think we have a problem. So the crazy part, Tracy, to answer your question, is that there was a school board meeting where a board trustee member shared Winifred Pfeiffer's name and shared the option to move the dual immersion program over to Winifred Pfeiffer. Keep in mind, every trustee member is able to make their own comments. I think where it became of huge concern is when our superintendent, Mr. Kurt DeBost, echoed the sentiment and said, hey, I think that's a great idea. I think we can also build a charter school on the 36th Street campus, and that would be a great compromise. So that's really where it came from, Tracy. And then from that point on forward, that option has really been developing. It feels like that way because Kurt DeBost did go on to KPRL and echo the same sentiment, as well as went to a Paso Robles Rotary Club and shared the same sentiment. So this is the part where the community, I feel, just doesn't feel involved. And I think when we talk about school boards and school districts and superintendents and administrators, there's a process that has to happen in order for it to make decisions, even to float around ideas. And this is part of why we've asked the district to take control of the messaging, is that we do live in a small community. We know the rumor mill is real, and I'm not going to fault parents, Tracy, for being being responsive and having concerns. When you're hearing it come from a board trustee member, you take it serious. When you hear it coming from our superintendent, you take it serious. When ideas are being echoed in important spaces such as the radio and Paso Rotary, you take it serious. So it's my understanding, Tracy, that Winifred Pfeiffer parents have not been given a formal presentation, have not been alerted that this is very much an option. So I really hope the school district, if they are considering that as an option, that they would reach out to parents, especially the principal, and have an opportunity to hear from their community first before deciding anything.
So just for disclosure, I'm a Pfeiffer parent, and I was also at the board meeting where the option was floated to bring the kid to essentially dissolve the Pfeiffer campus. And I felt like it was very inappropriate that it was brought up in that forum. I don't think that any options like that should really be discussed as possibilities until they're thoroughly vetted. And I would like to see best practices followed from the state of California. You can Google this, California State Department of Education, best practices for closing a school. There's a whole page on their website that details the process. And then at the bottom, there's actually a download that you can look at that has like a 7-month time frame for going through all of the steps in order to make sure that the process is fair. And I've been advocating from the beginning to make this a fair and transparent process, even going so far as to start a petition asking the district for that. But yeah, the Pfeiffer community was not met with by the district. I would like to also make clear that despite the fact that a trustee brought this up in a meeting, the district itself has not announced that this is an option that they are considering, although I do think it is one that they will consider because it has been brought up so much and talked about so much in the community. I want to make sure that they listen to parents and get input from parents, though, especially the ones that are going to be most affected by any type of a school closure, and really take into account how it's going to affect families, especially those that currently walk to a neighborhood campus. If they're going to lose their neighborhood campus, then how are they going to get to another campus? And then what are the provisions for after school care? So I've actually been advocating with the district to address those things.
So Tracy, let's get a little candid here, and let me ask you a question. What does a neighborhood school mean to you? Like, why is a neighborhood school important in your perspective?
I think it's really important to be able to walk your kids to school. I mean, I walked to school as a kid. It was important to me when I was deciding what school to send my kids to. I went and looked at Trinity. I went and looked at Pfeiffer because that was the school we were districted for. I looked into the dual immersion program at Georgia Brown. At the time, entering into Georgia Brown was very difficult. You had to go to the district office at like midnight and spend the whole night there. And I had a very fussy, like 18, I forget if he was 18 months old or 2 years old. Anyway, I had a very like fussy, small child, and my husband traveled a lot. He still does. And it wasn't possible for me to go spend the night there to get a first come first serve spot in the dual immersion program. We could talk also about how that was not a very equitable process to let children into that program. It's been changed to a lottery system now, as far as I understand. But that was the situation at the time. So my choices were the dual immersion program, which I would have had to drive my son to all the way across town. It's probably the furthest school from my house. And like I said, I had this other young child who required a lot of attention from me. And I didn't think that that was feasible. Mm-hmm. So I kind of ruled that option out. But we were also talking about the possibility of moving to a different location. And I didn't want to put my kids into a dual immersion program and then possibly move somewhere where that wasn't available. So those were considerations that I took. So I looked at Trinity Lutheran and I looked at Pfeiffer. I met with the principal at Pfeiffer. I met with the kindergarten teachers at Pfeiffer, and I went to an open house at Trinity. I really liked Trinity. I thought it looked like a great school. But I wanted to give an opportunity to the public school system. My mom was a public school teacher. My grandmother was a public school teacher. My sister teaches 3rd grade in the Bay Area. I come from a long line of like strong support for public education. So when I went to the Pfeiffer campus, and it was important to me to go in person because I had heard horrible things about our school system in Paso, how it wasn't doing a good job educating children. Oh, you don't want to be at this school. You don't want to be at that school. Only this school is okay. So I was like, I don't know what's true. I'm going to go check it out for myself. And if you know me, that is what I do. That's why I ended up on this. That's why I ended up on this Zoom call. But anyway, I went and checked it out. I thought the campus looked great. I loved the teachers I met with. I thought that the classrooms are actually bigger at Pfeiffer than they are over at Trinity. The school itself is a bigger school. And I thought that the resources they had available at the public school were better. I liked the classroom better. All of my schooling I'm in a master's program now that's at a private college, but until now, even my college was a public college. So I really wanted to send my kids to public school, and Pfeiffer was close enough for us to walk to, which was really nice. And
you make some great points too, Tracy. I've taken a look at the Pfeiffer community, and one of my joys that I see anytime I'm commuting or driving around, one of my joys that I see is families walking to and from school. Like, it gets me excited just seeing little kids walking with their backpacks and their mothers or fathers or abuelitas, because we have to understand that, accessibility to education is a huge factor in all of this. And Paso People's Action, along with the NAACP, went knocking on doors yesterday on Friday, and we were able to speak to people. And so I think that's another component too, Tracy, that you're touching on that I want to highlight is what may be another person's reality may not be your neighbor's reality. And from the work that I've done in this community, whether it's been serving on nonprofits or the work that I do in the community, we have a huge social economic challenges within families, that some families may have the time to be able to drive across town. We saw gas prices ultimately rocket, Tracy. That probably took a financial hit for a lot of our families. We know gas got really expensive.
Yeah.
So every little thing that we can do to support our families is beneficial to them, especially our neighborhood schools and the demographics that those people have the option to just walk to school or have a program that is only within arm's reach of their school site. So when we talk about neighborhood schools, this is why I think we're echoing, we believe in neighborhood schools, save the 36th Street campus. And most importantly, that we have to also think that and take into consideration the children, Tracy, specifically because it was like true that the Glen Spec community was already on the chopping block. And in a lot of ways, Tracy, I think it's fair to say that their community was disrupted. It was separated.
I believe that.
How did that affect our kids? These are friends. These are relationships of children that we should also consider and put in the forefront of putting them first.
So that's another benefit of neighborhood schools, is getting to know the kids that live near you. There's kids that live on our corner. They go to the same school. My kids like to play with them. It's really nice for them to just run down the street and hang out, or vice versa. Sometimes we have them over to swim. And then there's a kid 2 doors the other direction. There's other kids in the neighborhood that attend the same school that we know because they all go to school together. The kids that live on the corner, we knew there were kids there, but we didn't even know that family until we went to school. And I was like, hey, you live on the corner, I've seen you. So there's just this like really nice like community feel with a neighborhood school. And we have at Pfeiffer, we have a really nice community, and we have some excellent events that are put on. Our annual fiesta is probably the biggest. We also do a fall festival, which is really fun for the kids. Really get to wear their Halloween costumes on campus after hours. The thought of losing those things really bothers me. And this isn't just an issue with losing, like the potential of us getting redistricted to another school. But like there's something that I think a lot of people don't know, and I didn't know until I started asking a lot of questions about it, is that the dual immersion program at the Georgia Brown 36th Street campus is very unique in the fact that it is a hybrid neighborhood school and magnet program. There's a boundary around Georgia Brown that was established at the beginning of the program. It's my understanding they did that intentionally to give priority access to the families living around that campus to the program. And then after they got their spots, that's when they would open it up through the magnet program for the additional like first come, first serve spots that are now done through the lottery system.
And I think it's also important to touch too, Tracy, is that you just said so many things that I want to echo. Is I think when we see the amount of tourism that comes into Paso Robles, it's because of the community. You get this sense, there used to be a billboard as you were driving onto the 101 onto the Spring Street that said, Paso Robles, darn near paradise. And I think that's the reason why people want a little slice of Paso Robles and why people want to be here, why families want to stay here, is that there is a sense of pride in our community. And I've seen our community come together in the best of moments and the worst of moments. And I think it starts with our school districts. There's a huge pride of being a Bearcat. It doesn't matter if you have a bear kitten that will eventually be a Bearcat alumni. You're part of this community. We're seeing a lot of new people move into the community that we want to be embracing of, that, look, you don't need to be born and raised here to be a proud Bearcat. All these elementary schools, whether it's even private education, charter education, we're all going to get funneled either to the middle school or high school if you choose to, right? But we're all going to end up being Bearcats. So I think this is what is also on the line too, Tracy, is the fact that we want to continue good camaraderie, good respect, good understanding that we want to protect our community and keep those things thriving. I think it's also for the people that may not recognize, because Paso Robles has evolved so much, is the 36th Street area as well as community has always been a historical Black and Brown community that has had a lot of challenges. So once upon a time, that end of town did have a gang issue, did have heavy violence, did have so many other issues, which is why you see intentional investment on that end of town, which is why you see an extension of the library, why you see the Uptown Family Park there, why you see First Five program, as well as Community Action Partners, as well as the Youth and Arts Foundation, and most recently a $4 to $5 million Boys and Girls Club project adjacent to the Georgia Brown campus, as well as affordable housing, not affordable, yeah, affordable, the Habitat for Humanity. There we go. There have been multiple homes projects built over on that end of town, as well as the Oak Park area. And if you notice, that whole area has gotten a facelift. I think our district is the only one missing in that component of really making a huge drastic transformation onto that end of town. But I think it's important, Tracy, also to recognize there was a component to this dual immersion program of why it was placed on that end of town and why it was taken to the Georgia Brown campus. And it was really to bring two social economic children of different classes together, to bring something really positive to empower the Latino children on that end of town, to be able to bring two classes together so that we could build that camaraderie that you're talking about, the community aspect that you're talking about. And it was something that was very intentional. And I think that's part of the conversation too, Tracy, that needs to be had is, if we still want to hold on to that intention of what that program was initiated for, then I think the right thing, Tracy, is for that program to stay there. If the program has evolved and it's no longer serving that purpose and it's more about giving children a dual immersion experience, then we need to be clear on that as well, right? I think things can change and change is welcome, but we need to be truthful of the real intentions of how we're approaching programs and how they serve.
Right. And I think that since that program was intended to benefit the children of that neighborhood, it's really important for the parents of those children to exercise their voices and to be reached out to in any way possible by the school district if it does come down to the fact that that campus can't be rebuilt for if the anomaly either isn't, if they choose not to investigate the anomaly, or if they choose to go forward with that and it ends up not being a buildable site.
So question for you, Tracy, for those that are not aware about this anomaly, what is an anomaly? It sounds like a little insect or like something mysterious. What is an anomaly? And then what's the development on this anomaly specifically to the 36th Street campus?
I am no expert on this. Please go to the district for the official information on this, but I'll tell you what I know. There is an inferred fault line that that runs through the campus. So that doesn't mean that it's actually a fault line. It's not very well known where this fault lies. They think it might be in that general vicinity. This had to be investigated at the Marie Bauer campus as well. We didn't hear about it because the digging that they had to do there was not as involved as the digging that they've been asked to do at the Georgia Brown site. They've done some investigation of it already, and the investigation so far has been inconclusive. That's my understanding. And then there was more investigation recommended to try and figure out if they could build on that site or not. You can't build on top of a fault. I don't know if there are other options. That's the question we would need to ask somebody who's more familiar with this than I am, but it's possible that it could be like an old riverbed, because the Salinas River goes through this area. It's possible that it could have been like an offshoot of that at one point in time. It's also possible, we know there's tons of hot springs around here. It could be hot springs. We don't know. We won't know unless it gets investigated further.
And do you think it's that we should investigate? Do you think we should push this forward with this anomaly to find out?
I think that's a really interesting question. And I think that the way that I think about that is that, well, first of all, the information about the geological study is fairly technical. You can find those are attachments to the agenda for Monday night as well. And I think it would be helpful to have a specialist explain them in layman's terms, what it actually means, because I kind of know what a boring is, but I don't really know like how to interpret the imagery that they got from their studies. And I don't really understand. It said that the further investigation would be needed in order to come up with a better answer. I know that our superintendent is concerned that that would be in his mind a waste of money, because we wouldn't know. Well, it's possible that it might not give us a conclusion one way or another if they could build there or not. They need to do this to satisfy the requirements of the state architect. Otherwise, they don't get approved to build on that site. And it's also my understanding that the requirements for building a charter school are different, and that's the reason why he brought that option up as an option to keep that site a school campus.
Yeah, and I think it is important we have to, now this is just my opinion. I think this can of worms has been open about this anomaly, and we need to find out what it is, right? We need to know if it's safe, it's not safe. I think that will put everyone's concerns at ease, because the last thing we want to do is to have this wave and build a school site there tomorrow and have a terrible earthquake and have lose children's lives over this. Now, let's say that this anomaly is real and that it does pose a threat, and because we have federal and state laws that protect people, especially children, the state could say, no, we cannot build on here, it's not safe to do so. But a charter school says, yes, go for it, build on there. I don't feel right in my heart of hearts, Tracy, that that is the right thing to do. Whether it's a private school or a charter school, if it's not safe there to build, we should not be building a school site. And I think that's where people get hung up, Tracy, that we need to look at long-term, that this is about people's lives. This is about long-term situations, because the reality, much of this fiasco that we're seeing, it's a revolving door of people. Here today, gone tomorrow.
Yeah.
Who
Yeah.
is facing the consequences of situations? It's the community. It's people like you and I and our kids that are getting to face the short end of the stick. People have retired, people have left our community, people have walked away from the situation, and here we are. So I think that's important. And I think the other thing that I want to echo is I'm really concerned about how many options have really been shared. And I also feel like that was one of the things that we walked away from yesterday's meeting, from the diverse group of parents that we had there from different school sites, is we want to hear the options. What are our options? But I also feel, Tracy, that we can't explore options until we know what that anomaly means. Like, now that we've gone thus far, we have to move forward and we have to find out. And I think it's money well spent. I think we need to have it in writing, to reach out to our state representatives and ask for help. Is there funding that can help the cost of this? What do we need to do there? I mean, also, we live in California, Tracy. I'm sure there's other school sites that have faced these exact same issues. So we're not a special case here.
Yeah, there are other schools that have faced these issues. In fact, my hometown was the epicenter of the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake, and I'm pretty sure that all of our campuses are within a very close proximity to a fault line. So this is not an uncommon thing in the state of California to have to investigate a seismic feature. It happens all the time. I also kind of think about this as like, that school was put into that neighborhood for a reason. There's a lot of families that live in the north end of Paso Robles. And if this was happening on any other school site, would we be having this conversation? Like, would we invest? It just seems like we're trying to make a decision without all the information.
And most importantly, I think parents really need to be vocal, because we are talking about children's safety. Let's just put it back to a homeowner's perspective. If you are looking to buying a home where you're going to have your children and your loved ones in, and then the inspection report comes back to you to say, hey, there's a fault line underneath your home. Are you going to buy that house? Is the bank going to finance you? Is it a good idea for you to buy that house? That really depends on your morals and ethics, right? Like that can be a personal decision, but I would like to think most people wouldn't.
Well, I mean, it may also depend on what your other options are.
Yeah, and that's what we want. We want other options. So I think, were there any pending concerns or questions that we got from yesterday's group, Tracy? Or anything that other questions before we transition into possible options and touching briefly on Monday's meeting?
My battery on my computer is about to die and I'm outside, so I can't plug it in. So we probably should just quickly wrap it up. I
will wrap it up really quickly. So I think it's important to say, we continue to say no school closure. If it's not safe to build on that school site, it's not safe to build on there. No school site should be built on there, whether private or charter. A charter school is not going to help our declining enrollment. We already saw that with Almond Acres. And so what it means is that we do not sell this property. This property, we can hold on to it for years to come and not be a Mountain View. If you recall the situation in Mountain View, they sold a bunch of their property from their public education, and now you get 3-story buildings that are schools. We don't want that to happen here. I think it's better to move from a space of caution. We don't need to make long-term decisions on temporary situations. I think one of our biggest concerns is finances. I am fiscally conservative. So if we recall, the North County campus of Cuesta College, for the longest time, it was a blacktop with trailers, and now it's become something beautiful, but we didn't start there from day one. So I think there's other options. I think we need to move from a space of caution. We need to correct the concerns that are happening from all different types of parents, even Caucasian parents, even English speaking parents, which we're seeing a lot of concerns. As you can tell, we've talked about this now for X amount of time. There's a lot going on. Please get involved. We don't have to make long-lasting decisions, especially when our superintendent is getting ready to leave. I think we need to leave an opportunity for a new superintendent to create their own vision of what this district is going to look like. But most importantly, do not sell the 36th Street campus. If we sell it, there's never coming back from that. But that being said, we want to thank Allies for Immigrational Justice for joining Paso People's Actions efforts, as well as the support of the NAACP and also the allyship and support coming from Race Matters Slow. We are asking other organizations to join our cause. If you are interested in following up with us, please email us to pasopeoplesaction@gmail.com. There is a big meeting coming up this Monday. Please join in. It will be at the high school at the Performing Arts Center. I'm sure there will be signs there to welcome people in. The event is going to be from 6 to 8 p.m. I think it's important to be realistic. This is just a listening session, so you will be there just to be heard. Please get there early, be specific. This is your moment to share concerns, suggestions, or your own options. The board trustee members are there to listen. Please invite your neighbors, even if if you're not a parent. The roads are going to be impacted. A school closure means more traffic, possible losing teachers, larger classroom sizes. What does that mean for after school care? So many things. So I know I just said a mouthful there, but please follow us on Paso People's Action, join our group. We've been doing a lot of information, and we're just thankful that you are participating, that you're listening. Please continue to have conversations and continue to ask questions. That's the biggest takeaway. Don't take my word for this or Tracy's word for this. Do your due diligence, ask the questions, reach out to your board trustee members, reach out to Kurt DeBose. And I will say this for the community is that we owe it to every child that steps foot on our campus to give them a fair and equitable education. And that starts with neighborhood schools. We owe it to BIPOC and marginalized communities to make sure that their voices are amplified and heard, because many of these people cannot participate because of language, because of immigration status, because of fears, because of concerns. So we need to make sure that we stand in the gap. We also want to encourage every single parent, community member, business owner, taxpayer, voter. If you voted for Measure M, this is about you. Show up to Monday's meeting, speak up. Please get educated. And I think that's it. Tracy, did I miss anything?
I am working with a few other concerned parents to support public education in the county, and we are forming a chapter of Our Schools. It's kind of soft launched an Instagram account. You can find us at Our Schools Slow County. There'll be more information coming soon.
Awesome. So thank you so much to Tracy for all her efforts. For everyone, this is it. We will go ahead and put timestamps on this video, and thank you so much. I think there might be a part 2, so stay tuned. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.